Chapter 2: A three-step approach to solving life's problems. First, I detach myself from the problem and look at it objectively for what it is. Don't try to turn away from it or avoid it, but rather devote some time to studying the problem from all angles and perspectives. Look at it separately from yourself. Take the perspective of a curious onlooker and examine it from every angle, just as a scientist would. The key word here is objectivity. Separate yourself from the issue and look at it from the eyes of a third party. Do not bring yourself into the mental picture. Instead, see it from the outside looking in. The first step satisfies our rational need to ponder the problem we have at hand. Second, ask yourself, what are the possible consequences? What is the worst that could possibly happen? I wouldn't shun away from listing the worst things that can happen. Don't worry, just listing the worst possible outcomes will not make them happen, as is often erroneously believed by new students of the law of attraction. Thinking about it once wouldn't make it happen, although chronically worrying about it could turn it into reality. But that's not what I am asking you to do. All I am suggesting here is that you list the worst possible outcomes. A few realizations may occur once you list the worst possible outcomes. First, you come to realize that the worst possible outcome isn't as bad as you think or feared. It may even be something which you can accept. It is not going to destroy you as previously thought, when all the fear thoughts were swimming around in your head. Very often, I find that merely asking myself for the worst possible outcome calms me down, because it puts the issue into perspective. For each outcome you have listed, ask yourself the following question: how true is this? Is this really the only possible outcome? I can tell you in my years of doing this exercise that the answer, every single time, is no. Every time I ask this question, the truthful answer is always no. This is not the only possible outcome. There are many other better and more positive outcomes that are equally possible. Whenever you restrict or limit yourself to seeing only the worst possible outcome, you are tormenting yourself unnecessarily. You are also miscreating using the powerful laws of the universe. You could just have easily used your mental faculties to think about an equally positive outcome, but you spent all your energy thinking about something negative and unwanted instead. Once you take the second step, you begin to see the fallacy of your own thinking. Your thinking has been scarring you unnecessarily by showing you only the options that you fear the most. These are not necessarily the most rational options, but the options we have been conditioned to believe. As always, these are not the only options. There are an infinite number of more positive outcomes that can emerge from the situation if you let it. Finally, the third step is to just let the problem go. You have pondered it for long enough. You have thought about the worst possible outcomes and realized that they are not the only possible outcomes. You have realized the futility of thinking about it. What use does thinking about the situation do? It does nothing. And so you let it go to the universe. This is done through a conscious decision to stop worrying, adopt a carefree attitude, and say, if it has to happen, it has to happen. If it comes to pass, it comes to pass. Saying these words does not mean that your unwanted outcomes will come to you faster. Instead, they signify a sense of letting go of the fear-based emotional charge. When you diffuse the emotional, energetic charge surrounding any issue, the issue no longer has any hold over you. it no longer has any power over you. The issue dissolves by its own accord, even if outer circumstances seem to remain the same. If you immerse yourself long enough in this state, then you'll even wonder why you perceived a problem in the beginning to begin with. As Marianne Williamson writes, a miracle is a shift in perception. May I add that it is a change in your perception and not the other party's. This perceptual change cannot be forced. It must be realized. Divine intervention in action, a relationship problem at the workplace. Remember the story of the lady I told at the beginning who was constantly competing with and alienating all the people she worked with? This is a true personal experience, and I was at the receiving end of a few of her deeds. For a time, it was truly frustrating. I perceived the problem. I was caught up in the emotional play of it each time she did something that riled me up. You know the feeling. So I brought myself through the steps I've just talked about above. First, I pondered the situation objectively. Second, I asked myself what was the worst that could happen. It was in that moment I realized nothing bad could happen to me. Whether or not I engaged in an emotional playoff with this lady had no effect on my work. If I engaged in an emotional playoff, I only ended up making myself worked up and miserable. But it would have no effect whatsoever on my own work. It was in that moment of going through the steps shared earlier that I realized the folly of my actions. Everything was already whole and perfect the way it was. Whatever the lady did could not affect me, and it was all only an illusion. It was a problem with my perception of the situation. With that realization, my perceptions shifted. I gave up trying to change the situation. A miracle is a shift in perception. The physical situation is still the same, comprising of me, her, and other people in the office. But something has shifted energetically. The energy patterns are now completely different because I am now at peace with the situation and not wanting to fight reality. I changed reality. This is perhaps the most ironic and wonderful lesson one can learn about allowing divine interventions. When you stop trying to change reality, it changes by itself to align with your new understanding. A divine intervention has truly taken place. Now, I did the third step of the process and let go of my need to control her behavior. The moment I did that, everything fell like a house of cards. The whole situation no longer had an emotional charge over me. I began to see, ironically, the perfection of it all, whereas a few moments ago, I was seeing problems all over the place. I was so distressed I could hardly sleep. What has changed? Nothing but my perception of the situation. She has changed too. She leaves me alone now, despite me not sending out any physical signals, whether be it through emails, verbal communications, or the likes, in order to indicate my new understanding of the situation. The universe intervenes in truly unique ways for all of us. Dealing with a problem may give you a spiritual insight. I bring this example up because it illustrates two important lessons. One may think we have a strong spiritual understanding gleaned from reading a spiritual passage countless times. For example, prior to having this experience, I read repeatedly that everything is already perfect, and it is a problem with our own perception when we perceive problems. On a logical level, I understood the statement perfectly. But it was not until I was forced to confront an actual problem on my own that I realized what the principle truly meant. Quite frankly, it was difficult for me to accept that my understanding of the problem was causing the problem in the first place. I mean, she looked like the whole of the problem. Similarly, it was difficult for my friend to accept that his consciousness was causing his lack of entrepreneurial opportunities, not the outer circumstances in his case. And so, through my letting go of wanting to fix the situation, I was allowing divine intervention to take place. In this case, there were no earth-shaking, sky-splitting changes, and yet the issue resolved itself peacefully in the most beautiful way possible. Most of the divine interventions in your life will be like so. They will be subtle, but the effect will be profound. You will know it when you experience it. Do not try to force a particular outcome. Don't try to force a particular intervention or outcome. All too often, we pray for a particular outcome to happen, thinking it would solve the problem once and for all. For example, in my case, I could have prayed for the lady to leave the place, possibly through some kind of transfer or sacking. That could have been one possible outcome, and it is one that many people ask for when confronted with similar situations. However, what we think is the best possible outcome for a situation may not necessarily be the best possible outcome of the universe, which always has a higher and a better plan for all of us. Had I hoped fervently that she would somehow vanish from my life, I would have been praying in vain. The universe reached the most harmonious solution that was the highest and best for all involved. It required no one leaving, and everyone was happy. Why do we sometimes attract problems? One interesting question that arises from this is what all of us had done to attract this situation. I had certainly not been behaving in the same manner as this lady, neither did anyone else in the office. Yet we all found ourselves in the same situation of having to deal with her antics. So from a law of attraction point of view, what happened? Why is it that we attracted someone who was a polar opposite to our own behavior? Doesn't this contradict the universal laws of like attracting like? The answer to this question may hold valuable insights. In the beginning, when I perceived the problem with this lady's behavior and was offended by them, I did indeed, through my feelings and vibrational patterns, attract more of her into my own experience. That was when she ruffled my feathers the most. Attraction is energetic and emotional by nature, so no actions really need to be offered by me. However, the moment I made that subtle shift of perception and decided that she could behave in whatever way she wanted, which is really the only logical outcome there can be, for one can never truly control another, I stopped attracting her energetically. True, she was still there physically, but nothing she did now could affect me in any way. Maybe certain things I did would still affect her, but that's based on her own perception and consciousness, which was no longer relevant to me by then. Your well-being, then, is thus never dependent on another person, physical time, or place. It is only dependent on yourself. When you realize this, you become truly free from any and all limitations. You are free.